What is a vanguard party? Why would such a group ever be necessary? And are there any differences between the vanguard's Leninist formulation and its Maoist iteration? Today, we're going to take a look at the answers to these questions and more. Welcome to Socialism 101, a series designed to help educate people with no prior knowledge on the basics of socialism and communism from an ML and MLM perspective with short and easily digestible videos. If this sounds interesting to you, then go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell below. If you'd like to support Marxist educational content, then toss €1 or $1 per month over on Patreon to help keep this series going. If you're not in a position to support financially, you can help out a lot by just sharing these videos around on social media. Now, in 1924's Foundations of Leninism, Stalin described the Leninist Vanguard Party as the advanced detachment of the working class and the highest form of class organization of the proletariat. In other words, the Leninist Vanguard Party is a political organization comprised of the most class-conscious, politically advanced members of the working class, generally working as full-time professional revolutionaries, who are tasked with putting Marxist revolutionary theory into practice and organizing the seizure of power from the capitalist class by the exploited and oppressed masses. And importantly, it's not the party, but the masses themselves who make history, who push humanity forward from one stage of historical development to the next. So you may then ask, quite fairly, why does our class even need a vanguard party to guide it? Why don't the oppressed masses simply rise up and seize power for ourselves on our own initiative? Well, as Lenin famously stated in What Is to Be Done, without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. Without the framework provided by revolutionary Marxist theory, the spontaneous movements of the masses generally end up simply treating the symptoms of capitalism rather than actually curing the underlying disease through socialist revolution. Now, workers experience the negative effects of the capitalist mode of production and class society more broadly in their day-to-day lives. And despite the capitalist ideological state apparatuses which attempt to trick the workers, many will still identify these real problems that are experienced every day at the level of the particular. For example, their low wages, long working hours, being mistreated by their boss, etc. in their own particular workplaces. However, it's important to understand these phenomena not only at the level of the particular struggles in specific workplaces locally, but to advance into understanding these at the general level as manifestations of the global capitalist imperialist system. The problem isn't just that a worker's boss is a cruel individual, although that may be true. The problem is the capitalist system itself. And this is where revolutionary theory becomes crucial in helping our class to make the leap from the knowledge of the particular to knowledge of the general, to identify not only the symptoms, such as poor working conditions here or there, but the disease itself, the capitalist mode of production. And this diagnosis of the disease brings with it the possibility of its cure, socialism. Without a clear understanding of the general disease that is the capitalist mode of production, and with only a partial understanding of its particular symptoms, the exploited and oppressed masses who seek solutions are pulled in numerous different directions, each purporting to treat this or that symptom while never actually curing the underlying disease. Without a revolutionary vanguard guided by Marxist theory that's educating, agitating and organising the masses, progressive struggles find themselves subservient to spontaneity or spontaneous action in one form or another. Now, the spontaneous action of the masses has got a role to play in the development of a revolutionary consciousness, but spontaneity by itself, in isolation from a conscious revolutionary strategy, is incapable of progressing society from one stage of historical development to the next. Today, this spontaneous action manifests perhaps most prominently in movementism. Movementism is simply following behind or tailing social movements and popular uprisings or rebellions against particular injustices, but without any kind of cohesive, unified strategy for the overthrow of the capitalist system that genuinely puts power into the hands of the working class. For example, Occupy Wall Street and the Yellow Vest movement. As we saw, there's a popular upsurge by the masses who are trembling with righteous indignation, but without a conscious revolutionary strategy to carry them forward to the next level, these movements simply fizzle out over time. Historically, however, two of the main trends that emerged from this subservience to spontaneity were economism and terrorism. Economism, in this Leninist sense, refers to focusing narrowly on improving day-to-day conditions for workers within the confines of the capitalist system through the trade union movement, rather than consciously fighting to overthrow the capitalist system itself. For example, the economists in Russia limited the tasks of the working class to an economic struggle for higher wages and better working conditions, etc., asserting that the political struggle was the business of the liberal bourgeoisie. They denied the leading role of the party of the working class. In their deference to spontaneity, the economists belittled the significance of revolutionary theory and class consciousness, asserted that socialist ideology could emerge from the spontaneous movement, denied the need for a Marxist party to instill socialist consciousness into the working class movement, and thereby cleared the way for bourgeois ideology. Terrorism, on the other hand, refers to individuals or small groups engaging in unprincipled violent action which isn't rooted in the support of a mass movement, also known as adventurism. Now, it may sound strange to compare reformist trade union activism for better working conditions on the one hand to adventurous terrorist activity on the other. But as Lenin explains, the economists and the terrorists merely bow to different poles of spontaneity. The economists bow to the spontaneity of the labour movement pure and simple, while the terrorists bow to the spontaneity of the passionate indignation of intellectuals, who lack the ability or opportunity to connect the revolutionary struggle and the working class movement into an integral whole. In isolation, both the right opportunism of economism and the left opportunism of adventurism ultimately have the same roots in subservience to spontaneity rather than being part of a consciously organised, cohesive, viable strategy of revolutionary class struggle that engages the widest possible masses in the overthrow of the capitalist system. And this is where the revolutionary vanguard steps in to connect the spontaneous movements of the masses with a conscious, organised plan to take power for the working class. The Vanguard Party, by imbuing the masses with revolutionary proletarian consciousness through education, agitation and organisation, helps our class to avoid falling into the traps of reformist economism at one end of the spectrum and mindless adventurism at the other, neither of which are capable of solving the problems inherent to the capitalist system. Namely, the problems that stem from the antagonism between capitalism's social character of production and its private form of appropriation. Now, in order to overcome the highly organised and sophisticated rule of the bourgeoisie, it's necessary to have an even more powerful organisation of and for the proletariat. However, there are many challenges to establishing this. The bourgeoisie employs an entire state apparatus, including police and military, who are full-time servants dedicated to maintaining bourgeois class domination. Meanwhile, the proletariat spends 8, 10 or 12 hours of its day at work. This provides very little time to the workers for agitating and organising, as well as educating and getting educated to the point of developing revolutionary proletarian class consciousness. To remedy this situation, the Vanguard Party is to be led by professional revolutionaries who are dedicated to bringing about socialist revolution and work to this end full time. Lenin explained that a worker agitator who is at all gifted and promising must not be left to work 11 hours a day in a factory. We must arrange that he be maintained by the party, that he may go underground in good time, that he change the place of his activity if he is to enlarge his experience, widen his outlook and be able to hold out for at least a few years in the struggle against the gendarme. When we have the forces of specially trained worker revolutionaries who've gone through extensive preparation, and of course revolutionaries of all arms of the service, no political police in the world will then be able to contend with them, for these forces, boundlessly devoted to the revolution, will enjoy the boundless confidence of the widest masses of the workers. And so these professional revolutionaries, or trained worker revolutionaries, generally form the core of the Vanguard Party. However, the party being led by such figures doesn't mean that all party policies should be dictated solely from above, with the Central Committee arbitrarily commanding the rank and file membership who then command the masses to do this or that. This would be a gross distortion of the principles of the Vanguard Party. Instead, party policy is decided by the process of democratic centralism. Through the process of democratic centralism, motions pertaining to party policy are proposed and then freely debated by party members at various meetings. After the debates have concluded, the motions are then voted upon by all members. Once the vote results are in and there's a clear democratic will to either adopt or reject the motion, all party members are then required to uphold that decision and work collectively to realise it. So after the democratic process of free debate and voting, the result is then centralised, becoming party policy, hence the name democratic centralism. If members aren't happy with the result of a particular policy either being adopted or rejected, they'll then raise the question again internally and work to change it from within rather than from without. Externally, the organisation acts in unison, while internally there's a range of opinions and continuous line struggles. As they say, diversity of thought, unity in action. Now, the two aspects of democratic centralism, democracy and centralism, exist in dialectical unity with each other. If either one of these aspects is neglected, the party can't function correctly in its role as the revolutionary vanguard that both represents the will of the masses and is capable of putting that will into action. It either falls into ultra-democracy, where party congresses might be held in order to democratically decide on the minutiae of everyday life, resulting in organisational paralysis, or at the opposite end of the spectrum, and far more common in modern-day revisionist communist parties, is ultra-centralism, where virtually all decisions are made from the top down by a central ruling clique that's disconnected not only from the broad masses of the working class, but even from the general rank and file of the party itself. Both extremes of ultra-democracy and ultra-centralism are errors of mechanical conceptions of the party, one rigidly focused solely on a bottom-up approach, the other top-down. However, more extreme cases of mechanical conceptions of the vanguard manifest in the party being viewed as a substitute for the working class itself, neglecting the need for such an organisation to be deeply rooted amongst and accountable to the masses. Consequently, in such a case, a member's first loyalty is expected to be to the party, not to the class. An attitude not unlike religious faith is encouraged in the membership towards the party and its leaders. The result is the destruction of serious inquiry and questioning. The party and the leaders become the repository of all political wisdom. The party is always right. Revisionism turns dialectical thinking into a parody of Marxism. Quote, dialectics becomes the rationale for whatever particular twist and turn expediency may force on the revisionist leadership. Such a conception, unfortunately quite prevalent among many so-called communist parties in the 20th century, mechanically viewed the vanguard party itself as ultimately a monolith, devoid of its own internal contradictions, such as the contradiction between the rank and file and the leadership, the struggle between revolutionary and reformist lines, socialist roaders and capitalist roaders, and so on. The party was not grasped as a space of active contradictions, as an organic entity which must continually renew its leadership position and relevance in society by grappling with external and internal contradictions. Ideological struggle became formal. Democratic centralism froze up into relations of domination and subservience. And this is where more modern and genuinely dialectical understandings of the vanguard party come in to correct earlier mechanical formulations which led to the problems of ultra-centralism and viewing the party as a substitute for the working class itself. Grasping the party as a unity of opposites, this is the point of rupture to firmly establish the Maoist party concept in both theory and practice. Key to modern developments is the understanding that the party itself is composed of various opposing forces at all times. As Mao stated, if there were no contradictions in the party and no ideological struggles to resolve them, the party's life would come to an end. In order to correct the mechanical errors of the monolithic party formulation and ultra-centralism, Mao proposes the mass line, which internally reconnects the rank-and-file membership to the central leadership and externally reconnects the party to the masses. As Mao explained, in all practical work of our party, all correct leadership is necessarily from the masses to the masses. This means take the ideas of the masses, scattered and unsystematic ideas, and concentrate them. Through study, turn them into concentrated and systematic ideas. Then go to the masses and propagate and explain these ideas until the masses embrace them as their own, hold fast to them and translate them into action, and test the correctness of these ideas in such action. Then once again concentrate ideas from the masses and once again go to the masses so that the ideas are persevered in and carried through. And so on over and over again in an endless spiral, with the ideas becoming more correct, more vital and richer each time. Such is the Marxist theory of knowledge. And this, combined with a renewed emphasis on criticism and self-criticism, provides the key solution to the problems that emerged from earlier mechanical conceptions of the vanguard party. However, even with these important refinements in our understanding of the party, Mao reminds us that it's not the party that makes history, but the masses. It's not the party who will deliver stateless, classless, moneyless society to the people on a silver platter, but the people themselves. Thus, a resolution was passed at the Communist Party at China's 11th plenum in 1966, which stated that the only method is for the masses to liberate themselves, and any method of doing things in their stead must not be used. Trust the masses, rely on them and respect their initiative. Let the masses educate themselves in this great revolutionary movement and learn to distinguish between right and wrong and between correct and incorrect ways of doing things. With this revolutionary spirit in mind, the successful implementation of the mass line enables the working class to exercise leadership in everything, to place politics in command of administration, and to ensure that everyone serving as an official should remain one of the common people. And if the party betrays the people by embracing the capitalist road, then the empowered class-conscious masses rise up against the party itself, bombarding the party headquarters and carrying forward the revolution. Lastly, it's important to discuss the Maoist conception of the organisational structures best suited for successful revolution. These are sometimes called the three magic weapons of the revolution and consist of a well-disciplined party armed with the theory of Marxism-Leninism using the method of self-criticism and linked with the masses of the people, an army under the leadership of such a party, a united front of all revolutionary classes and all revolutionary groups under the leadership of such a party. These are the three main weapons with which we have defeated the enemy. Today, these structures would generally be constructed concentrically, with the Revolutionary Party at the core, the People's Army at the next layer outside of that, and the United Front outside of that again. Now, the United Front is comprised of various networks, alliances, and above-ground mass organisations that are open to anyone to join. From these United Front mass organisations, some may then choose to get involved in the movement at deeper levels. This kind of concentric construction protects the identities of revolutionaries who might otherwise be targeted by the state or reactionary forces, and helps to prevent organisational infiltration. Today we've taken a look at the Revolutionary Marxist Vanguard Party. We began by looking at why a revolutionary vanguard is necessary. Here we discussed the limits of the spontaneous action of the masses, including movementism, economism, and adventurism. The Revolutionary Vanguard unites the spontaneous movement of the masses with conscious, structured action that takes the people beyond simply winning piecemeal concessions from the capitalist class, and instead brings about the full seizure of power from the capitalists by the exploited and oppressed masses. This is coordinated by professional revolutionaries who are able to dedicate themselves to the revolution on a full-time basis. Within the organisation led by these worker revolutionaries, party policy is decided by the process of democratic centralism. However, with democratic centralism, organisations need to be careful to avoid falling into the traps of either ultra-democracy at one end, where it becomes impossible to get anything done, and ultra-centralism at the other end, where organisational leadership makes virtually all decisions from the top down without consulting with the party rank and file and the broader masses of people outside of the party. As many organisations have fallen into this latter trap, as well as having mechanically viewed themselves as monoliths, it's become clear that the Leninist Vanguard Party formation has required refinements and safeguards to prevent such abuses of power, which led to party leaderships becoming detached from the rank and file, and parties themselves becoming detached from the broad masses. The Maoist vanguard built on the Leninist model, clarifying the mass of contradictions that comprised the party itself, which would be handled through the deepest implementation of the mass line possible, both internally and externally, as well as introducing stronger processes of criticism and self-criticism. From this, the party of the new type can engage in rectification campaigns to correct the errors of the past and meet the changing needs of the oppressed and exploited masses of the modern day. Lastly, we discussed the three magic weapons of the revolution: the party, the People's Army, and the United Front. And we discussed how these are constructed concentrically with an underground revolutionary party at the core and the above-ground United Front of various networks, alliances, and open mass organisations at the outermost level. This concentric structure provides the best organisational protection from infiltration and sabotage by reactionary forces. Right, there was a lot there and we had to skim over quite a bit. As always, these videos only present the tip of the iceberg. For a more in-depth look at this topic and its various aspects, there are a number of texts that I recommend diving into. The first, of course, is Lenin's What Is to Be Done. However, when reading this, keep in mind that while there are numerous universally applicable elements within it, the party model presented in What's to Be Done can't be mechanically copy and pasted onto all conditions at all moments in time, but instead needs to be adapted creatively in accordance with local conditions, as Lenin himself demonstrated over his own life. Stalin's Foundations of Leninism, Chapter 8 specifically, also provides a useful overview of the Leninist party formation, though sometimes veers into the mechanical, monolithic formulations of the Vanguard Party discussed earlier. For a more critical, anti-revisionist analysis of mechanical formulations of the Vanguard Party, have a read of What is a Marxist-Leninist Party from Marxist-Leninist Quarterly 1972, which you'll find linked below. For a more complete analysis of the specifically Maoist Vanguard Party formation as opposed to the earlier Leninist Vanguard Party, read Comrade Ajit's essay on the Maoist Party. It's also nicely summarised in Chapter 28 of MLM Basic Course. Also, if you're looking for a more in-depth analysis of the limits of movementism and spontaneity as mentioned earlier, make sure to have a read of The Communist Necessity by JMP. It provides an important critique of the Western left in particular's failures to develop a robust anti-capitalist movement over the past few decades, and explains why we need to move beyond vague, eclectic, supposedly left-wing ideologies and return specifically to revolutionary communism. Right, thanks very much for watching this video, hopefully you found it useful in one way or another. Thanks especially to the supporters on Patreon who've made this possible. Thank you Southern Comrade, Ian McShay, Hugh Gopnik, Ian Snyder, Jacob Jaff, Borkio Gorilla, Ryan Hodgson, Soup, Madeline, Sonic232, Sagan, Michaela Schmidt, Christian Napalis, Alfonso Dingo Torres, Mekalova, Rock Artist, Grain Gree, Todd Sprang, Nike the Sage, Zakasi, Anglo-Irish Bolshevik, Amy Schmidt, Eli Leslie, Thomas Rossum Wood, Jason Schmidt, Delcy Bolt, Train H13, Miausifer, Mitch Schiller, Sixney Velan, Roja, MLM in Practice, Brian Ruiz, Eric Lindahl, ZK Goody, Kyle Rapp, Robert Jarzak, Doc Toma, Ayub Farah, Becky, Pastor Schubert, Mr. Miyamoto, Kyle King, Reverend Londom Hollywood, Wonderbad, JT Chapman, Jose, Joseph Shepard, Jack Schneidman, Comrade Amara, Welt for the 99%, Spoop, and Trailer Park Communist. Cheers everyone, agus slán go fóill.